Whenever I get to these stories, this particular story in the Gospels, where Jesus is asking all of these hard questions, there's a question that forms in my mind that when I meet Jesus, I'm going to ask him, because it just stays with me. And that is this: Jesus, when did you know? When did he know? In her recent book, Insight, organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich discusses some surprising truths about how others see us, how we see ourselves, and why this information matters far more than we might imagine. And according to her research, one of the principal ways to find out more about ourselves is seeking feedback not only about how others perceive us, but as validation about what we ourselves think. For thinking we know ourselves, it isn't the same as knowing. And so my question remains, when did he know? When was it that he realized he was the Messiah? Each of the Gospels presents us with differing views of how much and when Jesus knew about his divinity and what it portended. For John, it was pretty much sewn up neatly from the beginning of his public ministry. The other Gospels, though, not so much. In Mark's Gospel, it is revelation that begins at his baptism and is followed by a time of careful reflection during those 40 days spent in the wilderness. An intuition at first, his identity and destiny continued to be forged as he began his ministry, and continued to take shape as he healed the sick, taught the willing, fed the hungry, restored the marginalized. It is no coincidence, I believe, that the story we hear today comes at the very center of Mark's gospel. For this point in the story of Jesus' journey is also the tipping point for Mark between before and after. And Jesus makes this pivot in a very human way by soliciting feedback about his own discernment from those he was closest to, those he knows and loves and trusts. In the conversation that ensues, you can feel the synergy build as together they grapple with a wisdom that initially lies just beyond their reach. Who do people say that I am? Brings the first level of insight as they name some big names: John the Baptist, Elijah. Seeking just a bit more specificity, he asks, but who do you say that I am? And in an aha moment, Peter posits, you are the Messiah. An external affirmation of Jesus' own intuition now confirms this divine identity, allowing him to share without guile the implications of what this means. There is a single way forward: Jerusalem and the cross. The ensuing dialogue is the game changer. This notion of Jesus as the Messiah opens the door to a much larger revelation, one that catapults them from the mountaintop to the deepest of valleys. And as is the case for us, when we learn a truth that rocks our own sense of how things are meant to be, just like that, a moment of overwhelming joy becomes the assurance of total devastation. We know what this feels like. The phone call that brings us horrific news, the finality of a sudden death, the heartache of a dream snatched away from us by events beyond our control. This isn't how things are supposed to turn out. We know this because our worldview tells us it isn't how things happen. We have been socialized to believe that the underdog will somehow always come out on top, that good will ultimately triumph over evil, and perhaps that although others experience loss and heartache, it will never happen to us or our family. Because we know that this story too will end in the victory of resurrection, it's easy to gloss over the messy middle. But if we do that, we miss the whole point. the one that we're supposed to pay most attention to, and it's this: that the disciples had been so consumed with their own vision for a future that was filled with righteous revenge in the name of justice, that they failed to see the kingdom Jesus had been laying down all around them. So intent on grabbing up power that they couldn't imagine the incredible power of letting go of their own vision in order to take up the even greater one being offered to them. And this is what Jesus means about saving our lives by losing our lives, and denying ourselves by taking up our crosses and following him. It is the very center of our story, then and now. Discipleship, you see, is not a decision we make once and move on. Much like the unfolding of Jesus' own understanding, our commitment to be his followers is a lifelong journey of becoming, forged over a lifetime of experiences, decisions, and disappointments. Distinguished preacher and professor Dr. Fred Craddock put it this way: we think giving our all to the Lord is like taking a $1,000 bill and laying it on the table. Here's my life, Lord. I'm giving it all. But the reality for most of us is that God sends us to the bank and has us cash in that $1,000 for quarters. And we go through life putting out 25 cents here and 50 cents there. Usually giving our life to Christ isn't glorious. It's done in all those little acts of love, 25 cents at a time. But at the end of our lives, it is still the same $1,000. Who do you say I am? What's compelling about this question is not so much how Peter responded as the insight that our answers matter just as much, and in a way maybe even more. For you see, it is our answer, our words and actions, that defines who Jesus is for the world in our day. Whether he is known as a very holy man who lived centuries ago, or the God that we know and love and worship and follow, that's all up to us now. Ironic, isn't it, that the same question that defines Jesus' identity, well, it also defines ours. Amen.